One of the article was written today said that the president of the United States is not a president. He's not running the United States government. He's just a guy doing his guy thing. It's just Trump being Trump. The administration official, by the way, who authored the op-ed, also says that Trump officials have considered attempts to remove him from office. Quote, given the instability many witnessed, there were early whispers within the cabinet of invoking the 25th Amendment, which would start a complex process for removing the president. But no one wanted to precipitate a constitutional crisis, so we will do what we can to steer the administration in the right direction until one way or another it's over. Joyce, that's an amazingly sepulchral comment, basically. This presidency is going to die at some point. Let's just write it out and keep it as being as least dangerous as possible.
The idea that the 25th Amendment would ever be used is really hard to contemplate that we're at that point. And it would require the vice president to part company with the president, as well as a majority of the cabinet, and for those folks to get together and to ask the Congress to sit down and consider the president's competency. So the op-ed is correct. It would trigger a constitutional crisis. Congress would have a lot of decision-making power. We can debate all day whether they would stand up and perform their function under this setting, but it would be largely unprecedented. And similarly, the president's reaction to call this treason is just a mind-boggling display of his ignorance about the constitutional basis for founding this country, because something that the founding fathers did was to reject the idea that treason involved a sovereign, and they did away with a couple hundred years of English common law and adopted this view that treason is only a citizen who provides aid or comfort to a foreign enemy, that there is no duty of loyalty owed to the sovereign in that sense of it being treasonous. So he is shooting off cylinders here, but still hard to contemplate that we're in 25th Amendment territory.
It sounds like we are. Rather than dispute, by the way, the content of the op-ed late today that will appear in the New York Times tomorrow, the president, true to form, lashed out at the Times.
When you tell me about some anonymous source within the administration, probably who's failing and probably here for all the wrong reasons, no. And the New York Times is failing. If I weren't here, I believe the New York Times probably wouldn't even exist. So if the failing New York Times has an anonymous editorial, can you believe it? Anonymous, meaning gutless, a gutless editorial. We're doing a great job. The poll numbers are through the roof. Our poll numbers are great. And guess what? Nobody is going to come close to beating me in 2020 because of what we've done.
Zarlina, your analysis.
Well, in that clip, he looks sweaty and a little bit unhinged, to use Omarosa's word. But I think, you know, as to the other guest points, this validates what we already knew from the previous books and all of the excellent reporting the Washington Post and the Times has done over the past 2 years. I think what we as citizens and as analysts and people living in this country who care about our families and our safety, what we need to decide in this moment is, what do we do next? Is it the 25th Amendment? Is it making sure that the House becomes a Democratic majority in November so that we can then perhaps even talk seriously about the possibility of starting an impeachment process, which is not a one-step process, it's a two-step process. So that would just the beginning of that would just be talking about it in a serious way. And I think that we're actually in that moment. The president is a national security threat because he doesn't understand foreign policy. He makes brash decisions. He doesn't listen to his advisors. And we now have Bob Woodward on record saying that General Mattis essentially took an order from the president on the phone to assassinate Assad, an impulsive directive, and then hung up and said, I'm not going to do that.
What do you want the Democrats to do?
I want the Democrats to stand up and fight. I think that, you know,
well, that's a general term. Should they promise impeachment in this election?
I don't think you promise impeachment. That's not the role of the Democratic Party. I think the Democrats can message around holding this president accountable. Impeachment is one of the ways to hold this president accountable. But it is actually up to the citizens and the voters to ensure that the Democrats have the votes necessary in order to do any of those things. So it's also on citizens.
So let's go to Phil. I think you hear then the care which with Democrats are avoiding the word impeachment, even though I think a lot of them want it. They have a passion for it. I know. I can read polls. And my question then is, what's going to likely happen? I've been talking to you guys for months now about people in the White House willing to speak to you on background. This person went a step beyond background and put out an op-ed piece for the New York Times, a direct, to me, a statement of war against the president. Now, what's the next step going to be? Are people going to rally to this Fletcher Christian character? I mean, it's a mutiny. That's what's going on. People within the White House are saying this president's sort of a Captain Queeg, to mix my metaphors. He's a little bit off it. Something's got to be done. What will be done inside the White House by the staffers? Anything?
Well, we'll see, Chris. We'll see if the staffers inside the White House are going to be able to identify who this official is. And if so, that official's probably not going to be in the job for very long. But I think there's going to be mounting public pressure for this.
Do you know who wrote this op-ed?
I have no idea who it is.
There's a lot of speculation around here, I got to tell you. Most of us I've talked to think it was somebody who can write, somebody knows how to put an op-ed piece together, knows how to get it to the Times without any clerical assistance, without any kind of pomposity, having somebody make the phone call for him, somebody put it online for him. No, somebody can do it him or herself. That's what I narrow it down to. What do you make of that?
I don't know who it is, Chris. I can tell you from our reporting in the last hour that the president is speculating to his confidants that it might be somebody in a national security realm, but there's no evidence yet of who the official is. Regardless, though, I think there's going to be public pressure, as Steve Schmidt was mentioning, for this official to come forward and for others in the administration who identify as part of this resistance to come forward, and perhaps that will change the outlook that the Republican leaders in Congress have had throughout this presidency, which is to sort of let him go along without being fully checked.
Well, let me get to the earmarks. The earmarks, to use lodestar is a term the vice president likes to use. His speechwriters like to use the word lodestar, an unusual vocabulary word, and it shows up in this op-ed. It also talks about morality, the lack of morality, amorality or immorality. It sort of had a sense of maybe a neocon edge to it, a sense of this president doesn't know what he's doing in terms of international strategy. I can imagine a number of motives behind this, Michael Schmidt.
Yeah. And it's interesting to see what are the things that really...
Why would somebody stick their neck out and their career out unless they really believe, A, there's ideologies being threatened, or their morality is being threatened, or the republic itself is being threatened?
But from day one, you have seen more anonymous sources talk about this presidency than any other because they were so bothered by it. You see it every day in the paper. Now you're simply seeing it in an op-ed. So is it that different? Well, it certainly has caught the public's attention, and that's the thing. What are the things that make the public
Is there a difference between a guy?
Hey there, I'm Chris Hayes from MSNBC. Thanks for watching MSNBC on YouTube. If you want to keep up to date with the videos we're putting out, you can click subscribe just below me or click over on this list to see lots of other great videos.